Have you ever been in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, yet felt more alone than you've ever felt in your entire life? Have you ever smiled through comments that cut deeper than any knife while pretending everything was fine? Well, let me tell you about the night I finally stopped pretending, the night I stood up at my brother's engagement party and set everyone straight about my career, my choices, and my worth. This is my story, and I'm sharing it because I know somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that it's okay to stop diminishing yourself to make others comfortable. My name doesn't matter, but my story does, because it could be your story too. It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of our family's year. My younger brother James was getting engaged to his college sweetheart Sarah, and our parents had gone all out with this elaborate engagement party at an upscale venue downtown. The kind of place with crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and waiters in bow ties carrying champagne flutes on silver trays. I remember standing in front of my closet that afternoon, pulling out dress after dress, trying to find something that would make me look successful, put together, worthy of being there. Isn't it strange how we do that? How we try to dress up our worth like it's something we can purchase at a department store? I settled on a navy blue dress, simple but elegant, paired with the nicest heels I owned. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I practiced my smile, the one I'd perfected over years of family gatherings. The smile that said everything is fine, I'm doing great, I'm happy for everyone else's success. But behind that smile was a woman who was exhausted, absolutely drained from years of defending her choices, her passion, her career path to people who should have been her biggest supporters. I work as a freelance writer and content creator. I know, in a family of doctors, lawyers, and engineers, being a writer sounds almost quaint, doesn't it? Like saying you're a professional dreamer or a full-time imagination enthusiast. But here's what they never bothered to understand. I built this career from nothing. I spent 5 years working 3 jobs while building my client base, writing articles at 2 in the morning after exhausting 12-hour shifts at a coffee shop, pitching to hundreds of publications and facing rejection after rejection until finally, doors started opening. I've written for major online magazines, created content strategies for successful businesses, helped entrepreneurs find their voice and tell their stories. I make a decent living, not doctor money, sure, but enough to pay my bills, save for the future, and occasionally treat myself to something nice. More importantly, I wake up every day excited about what I do. I get to create, to tell stories, to help people communicate their messages to the world. But try explaining that to a room full of people who measure success solely by 6-figure salaries and prestigious titles. I pulled up to the venue and sat in my car for a full 10 minutes, just breathing, preparing myself mentally for what was coming. I could see the glow of the party through the large windows, shadows of people mingling, laughing, celebrating. Part of me wanted to start the car and drive away, but this was my brother's night, and despite everything, I loved him. I grabbed my clutch, checked my lipstick one more time, and walked toward the entrance with my shoulders back and my smile firmly in place. The moment I walked in, I could feel it, that subtle shift in energy when certain family members spotted me. My Aunt Patricia was the first to approach, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in that way she has, like she's conducting an inspection and you're already failing. She pulled me into a perfunctory hug, the kind where your bodies barely touch, and said loud enough for others to hear, "Oh, darling, you made it. We weren't sure you could afford to take time off from your little writing hobby." Little writing hobby. Those 3 words landed in my chest like stones. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept that smile plastered on my face and replied, "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Aunt Patricia. Congratulations to James and Sarah." I moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries, hugging relatives I hadn't seen in months, some in years. Each interaction felt like a small test, a subtle probe to see how I was really doing, if I'd given up on my ridiculous career yet and gotten a real job. My cousin Michael, who works in finance and never lets anyone forget it, clapped me on the shoulder and asked with mock concern, "Still doing that writing thing? Must be tough in this economy. Let me know if you need me to put in a word at my firm. We're always looking for good administrative assistants." Administrative assistants. Because of course, that's the only kind of real job he could imagine me being qualified for. I thanked him through gritted teeth and excused myself to find the bar. I needed a drink, something to take the edge off the growing knot of anger and hurt building in my stomach. As I waited for my wine, I watched my brother across the room, beaming with happiness. Sarah tucked under his arm, both of them glowing with that particular kind of joy that comes from being young and in love and believing the whole world is cheering for you. I was genuinely happy for him. James and I had always been close growing up, partners in crime. best friends even when teenage hormones tried to drive us apart. But somewhere along the way, after I chose my unconventional path and he followed in our father's footsteps into corporate law, a distance had grown between us. Not hostile, just distant. Like we were speaking different languages and neither of us quite knew how to translate anymore. The dinner service began, and I found my seat at a table with more cousins and family friends, people I'd known my whole life, but who had somehow become strangers over the years. The conversations swirled around me, talk of promotions and bonuses, new houses in prestigious neighborhoods, expensive vacations to exotic locations. I contributed when I could, shared stories from my work that I tried to make sound impressive, but I could see their eyes glaze over. That polite disinterest that tells you they're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can get back to real conversation. Then came the speeches. My father stood up first, his chest puffed with pride as he talked about James, about how he'd always known his son would be successful, how he'd watched him grow from a determined little boy into a brilliant young lawyer making his mark at a top firm. The love in his voice was unmistakable, genuine, beautiful, really. But it stung too, because I couldn't remember the last time my father had spoken about me with that kind of pride. After my dad, several of James's friends stood up, sharing funny stories and heartfelt tributes. Then Sarah's father spoke, welcoming James into their family with warm words about his character and accomplishments. Every speech seemed to include some mention of success, of impressive careers, of ambitious goals, and bright futures defined by traditional markers of achievement. I felt myself shrinking in my seat, becoming smaller with each toast, each round of applause. When the speeches ended and dinner resumed, that's when things really started to unravel. My Uncle Robert, who'd had several glasses of scotch by this point, decided it was time to address me directly. He leaned across the table, his voice carrying to everyone nearby, and said, "So, when are you going to give up this writing nonsense and get a real career? You're not getting any younger, you know. At some point, you need to think about stability, about your future. You can't live like a college student forever." The table went quiet. Everyone's attention swung to me, waiting to see how I'd respond. My face burned, that horrible hot flush of embarrassment and anger mixed together. I opened my mouth to give my usual diplomatic response. Something about how I appreciate his concern, but I'm quite happy with my choices. But before I could speak, my Aunt Carol jumped in. "Oh, Robert's right, dear. It's wonderful that you have your creative outlet, really it is. But you need to think practically. Maybe you could teach English at a high school. At least then you'd have benefits and a steady paycheck. I have a friend on the school board. I could make some calls." Creative outlet. Like my entire career, everything I'd built, all the late nights and sacrifices and small victories, was just some cute little hobby I did for fun, like scrapbooking or collecting stamps. My cousin Jennifer, sitting to my right, put her hand on my arm in what I think was meant to be a comforting gesture and said softly, "You know, there's no shame in admitting something isn't working out. We all have dreams that don't quite pan out the way we hoped. The important thing is being realistic and making smart choices for your future." I looked around the table at all these faces, these people who'd known me since I was born, who'd watched me grow up, who should have been cheering me on, and I realized something profound in that moment. They genuinely believed they were helping me. They genuinely thought they were offering good advice, showing concern, trying to guide me toward a better path. They had absolutely no idea that every word they spoke was like a tiny dagger, that their concern felt like condemnation, that their advice tasted like dismissal. Have you ever reached a point where you just can't anymore? Where something inside you that's been bending and bending finally snaps? That was my moment. I could feel tears threatening at the corners of my eyes, that burning sensation that comes right before you break down, but alongside the hurt was something else, something hotter and more powerful. Anger. Pure, righteous anger at years of being made to feel less than, of having my choices questioned, my success minimized, my worth measured against everyone else's definition of achievement. I took a long sip of my wine, set the glass down with more force than I intended, and felt something shift inside me. I was done. Done pretending their words didn't hurt. Done shrinking myself to make them comfortable. Done apologizing for choosing a path that brought me joy instead of just money and status. The conversation had moved on. People were chatting about other things now, but I could still feel the weight of their judgment, their pity, their disappointment in me. My brother caught my eye from across the room and gave me a concerned look. He'd probably heard the exchange at our table, but I gave him a reassuring nod. This was his night, and I wasn't going to ruin it, but I also wasn't going to sit there silent anymore, swallowing my dignity with every sip of wine. As dessert was being served, my Uncle Robert started up again, this time louder, emboldened by more alcohol and the laughter he'd gotten from others earlier. "You know what your problem is?" he announced, pointing his fork at me like a weapon. "You're too sensitive about this whole thing. We're just trying to help you see reality. The starving artist thing is romantic when you're 22, but you're pushing 30 now. Time to grow up and get serious about life." Pushing 30. Like that was some kind of deadline, some expiration date on pursuing your dreams. I felt my hands clench under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Across from me, my cousin Michael nodded sagely, adding, "Exactly. Look at James, he had dreams too. Wanted to be a musician or something ridiculous in high school, remember? But he got smart, went to law school, and now look at him. That's what maturity looks like." Something inside me crystallized in that moment. They were using my brother, using his traditional success story as a weapon against me, as proof that I'd chosen wrong, failed somehow. And it was so fundamentally unfair, so deeply misguided, because James hadn't given up on dreams. He'd found different ones. His path worked for him, and my path worked for me. Why couldn't they understand that there wasn't just one right way to build a life? I stood up. I didn't plan to, didn't think about it. My body just moved of its own accord, chair scraping against the floor, drawing attention from nearby tables. My Aunt Patricia looked alarmed, probably thinking I was about to storm out dramatically, but I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until I said what needed to be said. My voice, when I finally spoke, came out steadier than I expected, clear and strong despite the emotion churning inside me. "I need to say something, and I need everyone at this table to actually listen for once, instead of just waiting for their turn to offer more unsolicited advice about my life." The conversations around me died down. People at nearby tables turned to look. I could see my mother's face across the room, eyes wide with concern or maybe mortification, I couldn't tell which. My father had stopped mid-conversation, his attention now fully on me. James stood up slightly from his seat like he was preparing to intervene if needed. But I kept going, because if I stopped now, I'd lose my nerve, and I'd been silent for far too long already. I've sat through years of family gatherings listening to you all question my career choices, minimize my accomplishments, and treat my work like it's some adorable phase I'm going through before I wake up and get a real job. And I've smiled through it, made excuses, tried to explain what I do in ways that might make it sound more legitimate to you, more worthy of respect. But I'm done doing that. I'm done shrinking myself to fit your narrow definition of success. My voice was getting louder now, emotion breaking through despite my attempts to stay controlled. "Do you want to know what I do? Really know? Not just the dismissive version you've created in your heads? I run my own business. I've built a career from nothing, with no inheritance, no trust fund, no family connections opening doors for me. I work with clients across 3 continents. I've written content that's been read by millions of people. I've helped struggling businesses find their voice and grow their customer base. I make enough money to support myself, save for retirement, and yes, even take vacations to those exotic places you all love to brag about." I could see shock on some faces, discomfort on others. But I wasn't finished. "Last year, I made more money than some of you sitting at this table. Not that it should matter, but since you all seem so concerned about my financial stability, I thought you should know. But here's the thing. Even if I made half what I make, even if I struggled more than I do, it still wouldn't give you the right to belittle what I've built, because I wake up every single day loving what I do. Can you all say the same? How many of you drag yourselves to jobs you hate, counting down the hours until Friday, living for weekends and vacation days, staying in careers that drain your soul because they look good on paper?" The silence was deafening now. I could hear the clink of silverware from distant tables, the low murmur of other conversations, but at our table and the ones nearby, no one was speaking. They were just staring at me, this version of me they'd never seen before, the one who fought back. "You want to talk about maturity, Uncle Robert? Maturity isn't abandoning everything that brings you joy to pursue someone else's definition of success. Maturity is having the courage to build a life that fulfills you, even when people question your choices. Maturity is working hard at something you believe in, even when the path is difficult and uncertain. I've been more mature in my so-called writing hobby than many people are in their conventional careers, because every day I choose to show up for work that challenges me, that requires constant learning and adaptation, that doesn't come with the safety net of a steady paycheck and corporate benefits." I turned to my Aunt Carol, whose hand was frozen halfway to her wine glass. "And thank you for the offer to help me get a teaching job, but I don't need to be rescued from my career. I'm not drowning, I'm not failing, I'm not in some crisis that requires intervention. I'm actually thriving, but you've been so busy pitying me that you haven't noticed. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline coursing through my body, but I felt more alive, more myself, than I had in years. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? It's that we're supposed to be family. You're supposed to be the people who celebrate my wins, who ask about my work because you're genuinely interested, not because you're looking for evidence that I'm failing. You're supposed to be my support system, but instead you've become this chorus of doubt and disappointment that I have to steel myself against every time we gather. I looked over at James, who was standing now, his face a mixture of concern and something else, maybe pride, maybe understanding. James, I'm sorry. This is your night, and I don't want to take away from that. I'm genuinely happy for you and Sarah. You both deserve all the joy in the world. But I couldn't sit here one more minute and let our family treat me like a failure when I'm not one. I couldn't pretend anymore that their words don't hurt, that their constant judgment doesn't make me dread family events that I should be looking forward to. Sarah, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, surprised me by standing up and starting to clap. Slow at first, then building. James joined her, and then a few of his friends from another table. Not everyone clapped. Many people at my table just sat there looking uncomfortable, staring at their dessert plates. But in that moment, I didn't care. I'd finally said what needed to be said. I'd finally stopped pretending. My mother made her way over to me, and I braced myself for a lecture about appropriate behavior at family events, about not making scenes, about keeping things peaceful. But instead, she pulled me into a tight hug, and I could feel her shaking slightly. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "I'm so sorry we made you feel that way. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I should have said that more often. I should have defended you more." That broke something in me. The tears I'd been holding back started flowing. Not sad tears exactly, but tears of release, of relief, of finally being seen and heard. My dad approached more slowly, his expression complex, hard to read. We'd always had a complicated relationship, my father and I. He loved me, I never doubted that. But he'd never understood me, never quite known what to do with a daughter who colored outside the lines. He stood there for a moment, just looking at me, and then he said something I never expected. "You're right. We've been unfair to you. I've been unfair to you." His voice was rough with emotion. I was so focused on what I thought success should look like that I couldn't see the success you'd already achieved. That's on me, and I'm sorry. Have you ever had a moment that redefines an entire relationship? This was mine with my father. Years of tension, of feeling like I disappointed him, of wondering if he was proud of me, shifted in that instant. It didn't erase everything, didn't magically fix all our issues, but it was a beginning, a crack in the wall we'd built between us. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Some family members came up to me afterward, offering awkward apologies or explaining that they didn't mean their comments the way they sounded. Others avoided me completely, probably feeling called out by my speech even if I hadn't named them specifically. My Aunt Patricia left early, lips pursed in that way she has when she's deeply offended, but honestly, I felt too relieved to care. For the first time in years at a family event, I felt like I could breathe fully, like I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone's expectations and disappointments on my shoulders. James and Sarah found me later in the evening, out on the venue's terrace where I'd escaped for some air. The city lights twinkled below us, and the cool night air felt wonderful against my flushed skin. My brother pulled me into a hug, and I could feel him laughing slightly. "That was the most dramatic thing I've ever seen you do," he said, but there was admiration in his voice, not criticism. "I'm sorry I never stood up for you before. I always told myself it wasn't my place, that you could handle it. But really, I was just taking the easy road, staying out of it." I hugged him back tightly. "Your night got hijacked by my drama. I'm so sorry." Sarah shook her head, smiling. "Are you kidding? This was way more memorable than another boring engagement party with generic speeches. Besides, someone needed to say something. I've only been to a few family gatherings, and even I noticed how they treated you. It made me uncomfortable every time." We stood there for a while, the three of us, looking out at the city and talking about everything, really talking in a way we hadn't in years. James admitted that he'd chosen law partially because it was expected, because it was the safe path, and while he didn't regret it, he sometimes wondered what it would have been like to take a risk like I had. We talked about the pressure of family expectations, about how success means different things to different people, about how we'd both, in our own ways, been trying to live up to impossible standards. When I finally left that night, exhausted but somehow lighter than I'd felt in ages, I realized something important. Standing up for myself hadn't destroyed my family relationships like I'd always feared it might. If anything, it had opened up the possibility for more honest, authentic connections. Not everyone would understand. Some people would probably always see my career as less than, but at least now they knew I wasn't going to accept their judgment silently. At least now I'd drawn a line, established that my worth wasn't up for debate. The days following the engagement party were interesting, to say the least. I received several phone calls from various family members. Some were apologetic, genuine attempts to bridge the gap my outburst had revealed. My cousin Sarah, not the bride but another cousin, called to tell me she'd actually been considering leaving her corporate job to start her own business, but had been too scared of family judgment, and my speech had inspired her to go for it. That conversation alone made everything worth it. My Uncle Robert, surprisingly, also called, though his apology was more defensive than genuine. He spent most of the conversation explaining how he'd only been trying to help, how his generation did things differently, how I'd taken everything the wrong way. I let him talk, didn't argue, just acknowledged his call and moved on. Some people aren't capable of real change or understanding, and that's okay. I can't control how others see me or my choices. I can only control how I respond to their opinions. But the most significant change was in my immediate family. My parents started asking real questions about my work, not probing for evidence of failure, but genuine curiosity about what I did. My mom joined my professional social media accounts and started sharing my published articles with her friends. My dad, in his own awkward way, began introducing me at social events as his daughter, the writer, and while it was strange at first, I could hear a note of pride in his voice that hadn't been there before. James and I grew closer than we'd been since childhood. We started having regular dinners, just the two of us, where we'd talk about our careers, our dreams, our fears. He confessed that watching me build something from nothing had always impressed him, even if he'd never said so. He'd taken the safer path, and there was nothing wrong with that. But he admired that I'd had the courage to take the risky one. Those conversations healed something in both of us, I think. We'd spent so long in our separate corners, him in the conventional success camp and me in the unconventional one, that we'd forgotten we were on the same team. My work life didn't change dramatically. I was still doing the same job, facing the same challenges. But something inside me had shifted. I stopped second-guessing myself constantly, stopped measuring my success against other people's standards. When clients complimented my work, I accepted the praise instead of downplaying it. When I hit milestones in my business, I celebrated them instead of minimizing them. I started owning my achievements in a way I never had before, and interestingly, that confidence attracted even more opportunities. I landed my biggest client yet 3 months after the engagement party, a contract that would not only boost my income significantly, but also give me more creative freedom than I'd ever had. When I told my family about it at James and Sarah's wedding, which took place 6 months later, the congratulations felt genuine. The shift wasn't complete. There were still relatives who didn't quite get it, who still made the occasional comment, but the dynamic had changed enough that those comments didn't have the same power over me anymore. The wedding itself was beautiful, and my relationship with the whole event was so different from the engagement party. I didn't spend the evening bracing myself for criticism or hiding from judgment. I danced with my parents, laughed with cousins, and even had a pleasant conversation with Aunt Patricia, who seemed to have decided to take a more neutral stance toward my career, if not an enthusiastic one. During one of the slower songs, my dad asked me to dance, something he hadn't done since I was a little girl, standing on his shoes at family parties. As we swayed to the music, he said something I'll never forget. "You know, I spent a lot of years thinking my job as a parent was to steer you toward safety, toward conventional success. But watching you these past few months, seeing how you've built this career and how genuinely happy you are, I realized I had it backwards. My job wasn't to make you fit into a mold, it was to support you while you created your own path. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that." We didn't say anything else, just finished the dance. But something between us settled that night, a piece that had been missing for years. Looking back now, that engagement party confrontation was a turning point in my life. Not because of what I said to my family, but because of what I claimed for myself. I claimed my right to define success on my own terms. I claimed my right to be proud of my accomplishments, even if they looked different from traditional achievements. I claimed my worth, not as something dependent on others' approval, but as something inherent, unshakable, mine. The thing is, I'd been waiting for years for my family to validate my choices, to tell me I'd made the right decision, that they were proud of me, that my career was legitimate. But that validation, while nice to eventually receive, wasn't actually what I needed. What I needed was to validate myself, to stand firm in my own assessment of my life and my worth, regardless of whether anyone else agreed. That's what that night at the engagement party gave me. It gave me my voice back, the one I'd been suppressing to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to make others comfortable. And once I found that voice again, once I remembered how to use it, everything changed. Not just with my family, but in every area of my life. I started advocating for myself better with clients, negotiating higher rates, turning down projects that didn't serve me. I started setting clearer boundaries in all my relationships, not just with family, but with friends, colleagues, everyone. I learned that being kind doesn't mean being silent in the face of disrespect, that keeping the peace sometimes requires disrupting it first, that real love and respect in relationships can handle honest confrontation and come out stronger on the other side. The freelance writing community I'm part of started asking me to speak at events about building confidence as a creative professional, about dealing with family pressure when you choose an unconventional path. Turns out my story resonated with a lot of people. So many of us are out here building amazing careers and lives that don't fit traditional molds, and so many of us struggle with the judgment and doubt from the people we love. Sharing my experience, helping others find their voice like I found mine, has become an unexpected but deeply fulfilling part of my work. I also started a blog about the realities of freelance writing, the highs and lows, the financial truths, the emotional challenges, and it's grown into a supportive community of people who get it, who understand what it's like to forge your own path. That community has become like a second family, one that celebrates wins without qualifications, that offers support without judgment, that understands that success is personal and multifaceted and can't be reduced to a single metric. Am I saying that confronting my family at my brother's engagement party solved all my problems and led to a fairy tale ending? No, life doesn't work that way. I still have moments of doubt, still face financial uncertainty sometimes, still deal with the occasional dismissive comment from someone who doesn't understand my career. But what changed is my relationship with all of that. I don't internalize the doubt anymore, don't let other people's limitations become my own, don't measure my worth by their understanding or approval. What I want you to understand, really understand, is that you don't have to wait for permission to be proud of yourself. You don't have to wait for the people around you to recognize your worth before you claim it. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for you in the first place. Whether it's your career, your lifestyle, your relationships, your dreams, whatever it is that makes you have the right to stand up and say, "This is who I am, this is what I've built, and it's enough. It's more than enough." Because here's what I learned that night and in all the months that followed. The people who truly love you, who truly want the best for you, will rise to meet you when you stop pretending. They might be uncomfortable at first, might not know how to handle this new version of you that doesn't apologize for existing, but if the love is real, they'll adjust, they'll learn, they'll grow with you. And the people who can't or won't, the ones who need you to be small so they can feel big, who need you to fail so they can feel successful, those people were never really in your corner anyway, and that's okay. You can love people and still enforce boundaries with them. You can appreciate what they've given you while refusing to accept what they take from you. So I'm asking you now, after sharing my whole story with you, what are you pretending about? What part of yourself are you hiding to make others comfortable? What dream or goal or truth about yourself have you been downplaying or defending or apologizing for? Think about it. Really sit with that question. Because I promise you, the weight you're carrying by pretending is so much heavier than the temporary discomfort of being honest. And listen, I know it's scary. Trust me, standing up at that engagement party, my voice shaking with emotion, knowing I was about to burn bridges or at least singe them pretty badly, was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. But it was also one of the most liberating. Because once you stop living in fear of other people's judgment, once you stop contorting yourself to fit their expectations, you discover this incredible freedom to just be yourself, fully and unapologetically. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family or friends about your life choices? Have you ever reached that breaking point where you just couldn't pretend anymore? Tell me your story. Share what happened when you finally set people straight about who you are and what you're building. This community is here to support you, to remind you that you're not alone in this, that your path is valid even if it's different. And if you haven't had that moment yet, if you're still in the pretending phase, still smiling through the comments that cut deep, I want you to know that it's okay to be where you are right now, but I also want you to know that you don't have to stay there. You have the power to change the narrative, to rewrite the script, to stop accepting treatment that diminishes you. If this story resonated with you, if you felt seen or understood or inspired, please hit that like button. It helps more people find this content, and it lets me know that sharing vulnerable, real stories like this matters to you. Subscribe to Living Through It for more stories about real life, real struggles, and real triumphs. We're building a community here of people who refuse to live by other people's rules, who are brave enough to forge their own paths, who support each other through the messy, beautiful journey of becoming who we're meant to be. And make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story, because I share one every week, and each one is as raw and real as this one. Remember, your worth is not up for debate. Your dreams are not subject to committee approval. Your life is yours to build, and you don't owe anyone an explanation or an apology for building it your way. Stand up, speak your truth, and watch how the right people rise to meet you there. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, we're all living through it together, and that's what makes us strong.